Hello, I'm Margaret Murphy and I'm a writer,
And I'm Helen Pepper, and I'm a forensic consultant.
and together we are Ashley Dyer. And this is Splinter in the Blood. This is the American edition, and I'm going to read, actually it's the first section of the book, and Helen is going to talk about the crime scene that is involved in this section. A woman stands in the middle of Detective Chief Inspector Greg Carver's sitting room. She is holding a 1911 Colt pistol in her hand. To all appearances, she's calm. There are things she needs to do. She pivots on the ball of her foot, turning full circle, taking in every detail of the scene. Nothing has been disturbed. An empty whiskey bottle lies on its side on the floor. Greg Carver is slumped in an easy chair, one leg bent at the knee, the other straight out. Looking down at him, she feels anger and contempt, but also regret. His eyes are open. Blood oozes from a bullet wound in his chest. She shifts the weight of the gun in her gloved hand, flips the catch to safety. The place reeks of alcohol, gun smoke, and blood, and her stomach hitches, but she snuffs hard, purging her nostrils of the stench. She carries the gun through to the kitchen. His laptop is propped open, his files spread out across the table. The floor, ankle-deep in balled-up paper, looks like the aftermath of a massive hailstorm. On a chair beside the table is a cardboard filing box. She drops two of the files into it, gingerly wraps the gun in clean paper, and carefully lowers it on top of him. Under the litter of papers on the kitchen table, she finds a framed photograph. I'll do that again. Under the litter of papers on the kitchen table, she finds a framed photograph, laying face down. DCI Carver's wife, Emma, on their honeymoon, seated on a stony outcrop near a waterfall. Emma is blonde and slender. She's wearing skinny jeans with wedge sandals, a blue peasant top. Her hair, silky and long, is combed into a centre parting. She's smiling. The woman carries the picture through to Carver's sitting room, wipes it for prints, and places it on top of the cupboard where it always sits. In the bedroom, A3 size wall chart blue tacked to the walls. On one, smiling photos of 5 female victims, alongside handwritten notes. She peels the charts away from the wall, folds them, carrying them back to the kitchen where she scoops up the rest of the papers, balled up notes and all, and stuffs them inside the file box, jamming the lid onto it. She wipes down the door handles, light switches, his chair. Hefting the box, she makes her way out of the house, treading carefully on the fire escape steps at the rear of the building and down the driveway. It has recently been cleared of snow, but her shoe marks are visible in the fresh fall. It's very dark, and the curtains are drawn up and down the street. She doesn't think she's been seen. Minutes later, she returns, ungloved, without the box, and climbs the steps to the front of the house, wipes the bell push, then presses it. She doesn't wait, but takes a key fob from her back pocket and uses one of the 2 keys on it to open the front door. Inside Carver's flat, she retraces her steps, touching surfaces she's just wiped down. Finishing her journey at Carver's chair, she sees the drained bottle again, and something niggles at the edges of her consciousness like an itch she can't quite reach. But she doesn't have time for this. What's done is done. She crouches in front of him, gripping the armrests and staring into his face. She gasps, springing to her feet, panting, her heart hammering. She watches him for a few seconds. You imagined it. She lowers herself, holding her breath, her eyes fixed on his. Greg Carver's eyes are light hazel, flecked with gold. Sometimes those gold flecks seem to shimmer, but not now. Now they are dull, dead. She leans in closer, watching, barely breathing, and sees again a flicker of movement in one eyelid. Her shoulders slump, and she swears softly. Now, Helen, that scene, clearly this woman is destroying evidence, but as a CSI, you would not know that.
No, when you first arrive at the scene, you know absolutely nothing. you often get very, very little briefing. I mean, I would probably arrive at that scene and find out that a male's been shot and he's been removed to hospital.
Right.
And he's likely to prove he's likely to die. And that's as much as I would know going in.
So it's going to be quite messy anyway, because people have been into the scene.
Yes, we always treat the scene like it's pristine, but it never ever is, because someone has discovered that scene and has entered it. And in this case, we've got the woman who has rung the police and rung the ambulance. I'm not to know that she's been in there tampering with things, but also we've got the ambulance personnel have been in there. The first priority is always to save life if ever you can, so they're going to do whatever they need to do to stabilise him before they move him. So quite a lot of the scene will be very, very different by the time that I'm examining it. And you can't always tell what's been changed and what hasn't. So you just have to record everything as it is.
Right.
And then later on, when the detectives start taking statements, part of what they will want to know will be, so what did you do in the scene? Did you move anything? How did it look when you first arrived? And those things are things that they'll be asking of the ambulance personnel and also of the woman who's made the report.
So they're tallying those two sets of statements.
Yeah, and trying to piece together how things originally were, because quite often an awful lot gets moved.
Yeah. So there'll be a lot of, I imagine there'll be a lot of debris left by the ambulance people as well.
Yeah, there's usually lots of ripped open packets and pads that have been used to stop bleeding. Sometimes you get heart monitor leads and all sorts of things, and you can't disregard them because you have no idea what's pertinent to the scene and what isn't. You may have a fair idea that they've got no relevance whatsoever, but you're not going to completely ignore them because that one time they may be relevant. And things like pads that have been used to try and stem bleeding, you know that they've been introduced after the event, but they might still have some evidence on them. This guy's been shot. If the pad's been placed against the wound and then removed, well, there might be some gunshot residue, there might be some fibres from the assailant's clothing or whatever adhering to the pad. So it's still useful evidence.
So every one of those pads, would they be collected individually and
Yes.
bagged individually, so you could end up with
Lots and lots and lots.
Yeah.
I think the record for me was working on a murder that was actually a shooting in a house, and by the end of the first day we had 485 exhibits from the house. And we were there for several more days after that. So there's usually an awful lot of stuff gets bagged up at a scene, and to be honest, most of it's completely irrelevant, but you can't know that at the time, so until you can rule it out, you've got to rule it in.
And I guess there may be stuff that seems irrelevant and later on becomes very significant.
Yes, and even if it's not a significant part of the actual crime, it could be significant as what we call an interview key, something that only the person who was at the scene would know. And if they describe that thing or say where it was, or the fact that they took it from the shelf and put it on the hearth, and it was on the hearth when you arrived at the scene, they're establishing their credibility. Because you know that they've been there and they've seen things. It's not just things that they could have picked up from the newspapers.
Okay, so what you're telling me is you can't just go into a scene like they do on TV, look around and say, I think I know what happened.
No, it's not really like that at all. And if you do try and do that, usually you're wrong.
Okay.